Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can now hear us coming to you live for the Citation Salon Part 1. And you can type in questions anytime in the chat box, so please feel free to let us know if you have questions at any point during this presentation. We're going to be talking about citations, how you might use them, why you might want to use them. Hopefully you can now hear us coming to you live for the Citation Salon Part 1. Okay, so there was some feedback. Sorry about that. So we're going to be presenting, but again, if you have any questions throughout the time, feel free to let us know. So let's start by talking about why are citations important. Well, there are several reasons why it's important to use citations. Some of the top reasons are you want to avoid plagiarism. So plagiarism is when you copy someone else's work and pass it off as your own. And in addition to being dishonest, this is also a violation of FIT's academic honor code. So you do want to make sure that you check that out and are aware of your obligations to avoid plagiarism. But more than that, it's also important to cite your sources as a way to add credibility to your work, as a way to credit the creator. So of course, if someone else creates something, you want to give them credit for that. And you want to make sure that people know, okay, well, this idea was the thought of another person. It's so that readers can check your accuracy. It allows people to go back to the original source and check whether or not what you claim is accurate. And it offers a path for reading more on a subject. So if your reader is really interested in your topic, having citations helps them to find more works on the subject that they can refer to if they do want to dive a little bit deeper on the topic. So what are citation systems? Well, they are a set of rules for citing sources, and they are also intended to create consistency so that people in a particular discipline can be assured that there's always going to be a consistent means of citing. Every discipline uses a different citation system, and it's something that really allows you to make sure that as a discipline, so like history of art or sociology or law has their own citation system. Any of these citation systems, they can know that there'll be consistency across different works about how people talk about what they're citing. It also allows you to streamline verification because since there is consistency, it makes it easier for you to then go and find the work. You know what you're looking at, you know what information is going to be provided, and you really know that that's always going to be something that you can go and verify based on that information. And they do, as I sort of alluded to, differ by discipline. So citation systems refer to the type of citation for a different organization. So for example, the MLA style of citations, which we'll talk about more later on, is used in the humanities. There are other systems that are used for other types of disciplines. So they might have their own particular way of doing things, and that's going to be a little bit different and might be more based on what's important in that discipline. So how are the citation systems different? Well, there are a lot of subtle differences between the various citation systems. And in today's presentation, we're primarily going to be talking about three of them: MLA, APA, and Chicago/Turabian. Those are basically the same, as we'll talk about more in a little bit. And these are the major differences, but these aren't the only differences. There are lots of subtle differences as well in terms of the exact placement of things, the exact grammar and style used for things like how you reflect a date and information of that sort. But to give you some sense of overarching what the differences are between these systems and a little bit about why they're different, we can talk about them in this format with these three major differences. The first difference is in-text citation, which is more common in MLA and APA, versus footnotes, which is used in some forms of Chicago and Turabian. And there are a lot of different reasons why you might pick one versus the other. So for example, in-text citations often work best when there aren't necessarily quite as many citations. And they often also work best when, as we'll talk about in the next point, you want to put more of an emphasis on the name of the author and the date. So for example, a lot of disciplines that use footnotes do so because a single footnote might include citations to a number of different works, and that would be very difficult to clearly put into a parenthetical in the text, and it would break up your paragraph. So it's just a different style and the different needs of the disciplines that use these citation styles. Next, as we kind of mentioned, there can be a difference in what you emphasize. So for example, in the MLA style of in-text citation, there's more of an emphasis put on the name. And that's because in the humanities, they feel that it's more important that you focus on who had the thought and who the person is who originated the idea that's being discussed and came up with the language. And some people have argued that this is because in the humanities, they're more focused on analyzing the exact nature of the language of the statement. So for example, a piece of literature, and really diving in and navigating the fine minutia of a quotation and thinking about it in the context of who wrote it as opposed to when it was written, for example. Now, the alternative to this is to focus on the date. And that is something that is done in APA style. And APA style is used more for the social sciences. And in those fields, the feeling is that there's more importance attached to date. So for example, maybe they care less who wrote something and whether it's the latest information. So they might care to know about, for a particular idea, was this something that came up in 2020, or is it an idea that came up from 1940? Because in the social sciences, there's more of an emphasis on making sure that you're following the latest thinking, or at least thinking about whether or not the date is important in the relevance of the information. And then there's the question of sort of flexibility versus structure, which is our third point. And flexibility is really what's available in Chicago Turabian. Within Chicago Turabian, there are actually two completely separate formats, which we can talk about a little bit more later. But again, there's sort of there's a version of it that has footnotes. There's a version of it that has in text. There's also a little bit more of a streamlined version, which is what Turabian is. Basically, the difference between Chicago and Turabian is the actual book that's used for each of those. So Chicago is a very detailed, publisher-focused book that is something like 1,000 pages long, whereas Turabian is a more streamlined version of this that's available for students. And that flexibility is part of what's built into this system. Chicago Turabian allows you to have different approaches all within the same system. This is in alternative to MLA and APA, which are more strictly structured and really have at their core a really somewhat inflexible structure that they're going to put in place and ask everyone to follow no matter how they're using the system. So those are just some of the ways that the citation systems differ. And then as we look at some examples of them, you'll see that they also differ really in how they order the information and how they represent it. But when we're looking at those differences, think about how that is tied to this greater emphasis on structure versus flexibility, the greater emphasis on name versus date, and these sorts of more wide-scale philosophical differences between the citation systems. So now let's start looking at how you cite some information in the different systems. So we do a lot of trend forecasting. So let's start with how you would cite a forecast. So as we can see here, in the APA style, you're going to start with the author, last name first. If it's a corporate author, you don't change the order of the pieces of the name. But if it is, say, for example, George Washington, you would say Washington, comma, George. Then you put the year, and that would be the year that that particular forecasting item was published. Then you put the title of the particular report you're looking at in italics, and then you say where it was retrieved from. So looking at a specific example here, you can see that we're looking on the left at this report or these images, and we want to cite those. So we found them in Fashion Snoops. So the first piece of information, which is the corporate author, is Fashion Snoops. If they did say that a particular person who worked for Fashion Snoops instead had written this report and they gave that person's name, you would instead include that name here. But in the absence of that, you would just say that it was written by Fashion Snoops. Then you'll see that it was published in 2019. And then it's Women's Forecasted Tailoring, Spring Summer 2020. But, oh, sorry, 20. And that you'll put in italics because it's the title. And then you're going to say what database it was retrieved from. And in this case, that's once again Fashion Snoops. Structurally, you'll see that this reference is double spaced and that the second line is indented. And that's very common with citation pages, which can be called either works cited or references. And those are generally going to have indents for the next, for the second line and subsequent lines of any citations. So now let's compare and contrast how that might look in MLA. So still looking at a forecast, still looking at the same forecast, we're going to look at how this looks in MLA. So again, you're going to start with the author, but if we compare, you'll see that in this case, we're going to put the full name for the author. So in APA, going back to it, you just put the author's last name and then their first initial. But in MLA, you put the full name. And that again goes to their focus, which we talked about, in who wrote something. So they're very interested in the person who wrote it, which means greater focus on the name. So they're going to spell out the full name. So it would be author, comma, full first name. Then in quotation marks, they have the title. And then they have the date that it's published, where it's published, and the URL if relevant. So what we can note here is, again, this also matches with what we were saying about that emphasis on names versus dates. They've moved the date information later in the citation than in APA. So that's another indication that they prioritize name more and don't think that date is as important in the MLA style. So you can see that we have Fashion Snoops is again the title of the author. Then we've got the name of the report. Then we've got where it was published, the date, and then with the MLA system, you do put in the URL. And this is on the works cited, and you'll see that again, it's double spaced, and everything after the first line is indented. Now let's look at Chicago. So for Chicago, we have a bibliography instead of a references or a works cited page. And here it's going to, once again, it's going to look a little bit like MLA at the start because it's going to have the author, which is again Fashion Snoops. Then the title of the forecast. Do note that in this case, author is not done last name first. Title of the forecast, and then the last modified. So when was this last edited? And that's sort of an interesting difference that they have, is that they focus on not necessarily the date that it was published, but particularly for things that can change, like online material, what was the most recent day that any changes to it were made? And so that would be the date would go next. And then they also have the URL requested. So that's how you would cite any forecasts. And if you do have any questions on that or anything else as we're going through it, feel free to let us know in the chat. But let's continue on and look at how you might cite materials in a database. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talk about in this session is that we at the FIT library offer a lot of resources that can support you in doing citations. So when we talked about forecasts, we were talking about it just sort of in general. How do you write the citation? But for the next few examples, we're going to be looking at how you can use the tools that we provide to instead find the citation information for different works that are owned by the library. So in this case, we're looking at how you can cite database information. And you'll see that in our ProQuest databases, I'm in the Vogue archive right now, but this is also the system and style used for a number of our databases. In fact, this exact style is used for Harper's, the Women's Wear Daily archive, and the Vogue Italia archive. So exactly this look. And ProQuest also offers some other resources that we have access to that have a similar platform. And within this, you would find something that you're interested in. So let's say we want to quote this page of this particular article, for example. And you can see following this arrow right up here in these green dots, the second one from the left is cite. And if we go ahead and click on that, it's going to pop up with a citation for us. And it's going to tell us the right way to cite this under the various styles that we might be interested in. So looking at APA 6th edition, and you do want to be a little bit careful that you're thinking about which edition you're using. Usually that's something your faculty member will tell you in your assignment. But if you don't have that information, you can default to the latest. Sometimes we may not have the latest as the default in these tools we're going to discuss. And in those cases, usually the changes aren't significant enough that you need to worry about it too much. But I do always encourage students whenever they're using one of these citation generating tools to make sure that you do proofread it, which we'll talk about more as we look at this. So you can see that as soon as I click citation, it pops up and it gives me the citation for this item, and it's in APA. But we've already looked at APA, so we might be able to tell that there's a couple little issues here. And that's what I always like to point out to people, is that you don't want to just copy and paste this into your work. You do want to sort of look at it critically and see if any minor edits are needed. That's not to say that these tools aren't helpful, but they do need a little bit of proofreading because they are all automatically generated. So in this case, a couple of things that jump out to me are, first of all, I may want to not capitalize the last name entirely. Not a major point, but it's also not how we've been seeing it done in other citations. Another thing that you may notice about this is that they have single space between these two lines. And as we talked about, you really do want it to be double spaced if you are following the full APA citation style. So when you copy and paste this into your document, you're going to want to make sure that you make it consistent with your other citations. But let's say you thought, okay, this is a good starting place. I want to start with this. You would click on the copy button, and that will copy it to your clipboard. And now you can use the paste function in your word processor like Microsoft Word or Google Docs to add this to your document. And then you can make those minor changes, and you don't have to come up with it all by yourself. Now, let's say that you don't use the APA 6th edition. Well, in fact, this actually is a tool that has a lot of different citations available. As you can see, this is a drop-down menu. And if I were to click on that drop-down menu, you'll see that it actually offers a huge array of different citation styles, probably way more than we would ever really particularly be interested in. But you can see that in this case, I'm looking at MLA, 8th edition. And they also have Turabian, and then they also have the Chicago. And here you can see it even offers both the option for the author date system and the notes bibliography system. So you really do have this option to pick exactly the style you want and copy it that way into your presentation. Now, if there aren't any questions, we can continue into talking about how to cite books. So many of you have probably used OneSearch in the past, but I wanted to talk about some of the features that it does have available to you that can help you with citations. So if you run a search, so in this case, I ran a search for interior design, and we can see I ran it for digital materials, and I limited my results to books so that I'm only looking at books that are available online. So a few things about this and a few different ways you could get help citing it. So let's say we're interested in this first book. Well, from this screen, there are several different ways you can get library help, and there's one way that you can actually just get an automatically generated citation. So the first way that you can get library help is that for some of our departments and keywords that maybe people search, that you're actually going to come up with a suggested librarian. So if you're working on interior design and you find that you're doing research and you have questions about the research or the citations, you can use this functionality to email Lana, who is the person who is our liaison to interior design, and she will either respond to you or pass your question on to the right person so that you can get help that way from the library. If you want more immediate help and you're working during the hours that we're open, or even if you're working late at night, if you click this Ask Us button, during our normal hours, it will be a chat box where you can ask us questions, and that is available 7 days a week. And if it's after hours, if you're somebody who's a night owl and you're studying at 3 a.m., it'll still pop up with a way to submit a question to us and have us answer it when we open the next day. So those are some ways that you can get help from a person with your citation questions or your general research questions. But now let's look at how you could actually just automatically generate a citation for this book, much like we did in the database. So if you look here, you'll see that there are these 3 dots next to this book. So I'm looking at it right now, and it says the modern interior. It says that it's a book, and off to the right by this arrow, you'll see these 3 dots. So if I click on those 3 dots, you'll see that it's going to pop up a little box about the book. And in the middle of the options here where the red arrow is pointing, it says citation. So you can actually click on that to get citation information for the book. So let's say I click on that. Oops. Well, let's say I click on that, and it will take you to a pop-up where it's going to allow you to pick between Turabian or APA or MLA. And you can pick any of the 3 that you want. And again, with a button click, you'll be able to copy them exactly into where you want to and paste them into your own document. And after we finish going through the slides, we can take a look at that live in the system to get a sense of how that might work. So I also wanted to point out that we do have a lot of guides that can help you to do this work as well. So if you are doing citations and you're struggling with it, please do be sure to refer to our citation guides. So those guides can be found on our research guides page. And under citation help, we have specific guides that will help you to cite sources in APA, Chicago/Turabian, and MLA. So no matter which citation system you're using, we'll have the exact right type of citation offering for you. You can also see that we have an entire guide to Zotero. And Zotero is a tool that will help you manage your research and then at the end of the day generate citations for all the sources you've uploaded into it. So that can also be a very useful way of getting this information collected and stored neatly and helping you to track the work as you go along. So as you can see here, for each of these research guides, and these are the 3 research guides all right here, we will tell you a little bit about the style. We will show you how to find them in one search, as we're going to see in a moment. And then on the left-hand side, we have a menu that takes you to all the different ways that you would cite specific resources. And in each of those cases, we're going to have specific examples that would be of interest to students at FIT. So these are all going to be things that are really very realistic to you as an FIT student. Books from our collection, how to cite things like fashion forecasts, images and videos and museum items, all the sorts of things that might be more difficult to find in other websites. So I would highly recommend that you look at these resources since they are really geared specifically towards the needs of FIT students. And then the final way that you can get help is by asking us. And we can look at where this is on our website when we're looking at the live website as well. But we have as I mentioned, the ability to chat with us or to talk to us in a variety of different ways. So just as you can click when you're in OneSearch to ask us things, you can also come to the Ask the Library page and you can submit questions, you can chat with us. Anytime that we're open, you can come to virtual office hours, which are offered Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. and Monday and Wednesday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. And you can even sign up for a one-on-one research appointment where we'll meet one-on-one with you and help you with whatever questions you might have, whether that these questions are related to doing the research or doing the citations. We're more than happy to meet with you and help you. So if you do feel like you want a dedicated longer chunk of time to talk to a librarian, you can sign up for one of those and drop by and get one-on-one help. But you can also usually get one-on-one help at the virtual office hours, since often there's only one person at a time there, and it's pretty easy to just drop in and get help from a librarian that way. And then for citation help, for answers to specific questions that you have or develop as you're doing your projects, you can also join us for our part 2 of our Citation Salon. And that will be on Thursday, December 3rd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And this time it will be in a Google Meet so that it's easier to share our screens or for you to share your screen and for us to go through and look at your citations and offer you help and answer any questions you might have. So I would definitely encourage you to save this date and time in your email. The link is there. We're also posting it on social media in FIT link, and I'm sure you'll see it around. But that bit.ly link is one that you can already save, and that's where we'll be meeting so that we can help you to go over any specific questions you might have for your classes and projects. So before I go to live demo, does anybody have any particular specific questions they would like to ask at this point? Okay, then I'm going to do a quick demonstration of our website. So you are now seeing the library's website, and I can show you where and how you can get to several of the features that we've discussed so far today. So first of all, if you come down here to OneSearch, you can run a search. So we can just search for menswear, for example. And when you run a search in OneSearch, we can see that we have this Ask Us feature over here. I can pop this out and have the ability to chat live with someone right this minute to get an answer to my question. But also, now that I've run this search, you'll see that the top item is a book. And just as I was describing, I can click here. Now I pop out citation information. And if I click on this citation information and go down just a little bit further so we can see it well, this is going to give me the option to copy this citation in MLA 8th edition, APA 6th edition, or Chicago Turabian 16th edition. Now, it is worth noting that this isn't always the latest edition that you'll find here in this feature, but again, it's usually not major differences, so it's at least a good starting point. And we can see if we look at these that we're going to see the same sorts of differences in focus that we talked about. So you'll see in APA, just as we discussed, it's going to be author's last name, comma, first initial, then the date, then menswear, 2nd edition, Bloomsbury. And let's say I thought, okay, that looks great. I would click this copy to clipboard, and now it has been copied. You'll see I get this little verification message, and I could paste it into another work so that I don't have to generate that from scratch for myself. Clicking on MLA, you'll see it's going to redo it so that it's similar, but in the correct order and style for MLA. So because they focus more on the author, there's going to be the full author's name, and you won't come to the date until the very end. So that's a really helpful tool because it does let you find out as you're doing the search. And what I would recommend is if you're starting off your research and you're looking for things in OneSearch, as you're finding the materials, be sure to be copying these citations because it's very, very tempting to leave the citation process until the end. And that's something that everyone has been tempted to do at some point in their academic career. You always think that it's going to be something you can come back to later. I don't have time right now. I'm in a rush. But the simple fact of the matter is, you're never going to want to come back to it, and it's never going to be easier. So it's better to just, make sure that you are doing it in the initials phase. So let's see. I'm realizing that I think maybe it's not showing you what I think it is on the screen. So let me figure out how to share. Let's see if I reshare my screen. And this should now show you. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I was saying about seeing the features of the citation tool in OneSearch. So this is going to allow you to see a little bit more about what's available in the OneSearch tool specifically. So we can go back and see that again. Okay, so here it is showing the different styles for APA and MLA. So these are really good. You can do it right away as you're doing your search. Just copy this information, and if you don't end up using the book, it's easy enough to delete it later. So now we can go back to the homepage again, and I can show a couple more resources where to find them. So I did mention that you might want to use our research guides. So if you are interested in our citation research guides, you'll find those up here on our research guide page. And you'll see here is that citation help section that I mentioned. If we click on it, it's going to take us to all three of the guides. And our newest one is Chicago Turabian. So even if you have not seen that in the past, we do now have that. And let's take a look to see what one of these guides looks like. So you'll see that it's going to tell you a little bit about the citation style. It'll explain that Chicago and Turabian are basically the same. It's going to tell you about the difference between notes, bibliography, and author date. It will show you how to do that work in OneSearch that I showed you. And then it's going to show you the various types of citations. So if you wanted to know how to cite a book, you can come here and see many, many different examples. So our guides are really great, tailored to the needs of FIT students, ways of getting citation information. Now, from our website, another thing that it's worth knowing about is Ask the Library. The Ask the Library feature is where you can come to get all those different types of help I was telling you about. So from here, you'll see that you'll be able to chat live with us. You'll be able to find the link to get to our virtual office hours. You can ask us a question in the middle of the night and we'll answer you the next business day. Or if you scroll down here, this is the link that you would use for one-on-one research appointments. So there are many, many different ways that you can get in touch with us, and we're actually really happy to help you any of those ways. So do feel free to stop by anytime. And let us know in the comments if you have any particular questions. Okay, so I see we have one comment, which is, I have a question about how to cite a footnote. So I want to know exactly what you mean, whether you want to know how to cite a footnote, the information that you're citing is in the footnote, or you want to know how to cite using footnotes. Can you tell me which one of those it is? Like, are you asking how you would use footnotes appropriately in your own work? Or did you see information in your book in a footnote and you want to cite that? I can try kind of answering both maybe. So the answer to the first question of how would you cite using footnotes, of the styles that we talked about, the only one that requires footnotes is actually the Chicago style. And in fact, only one of the two Chicago styles does. So you could go to our guide about Chicago and refer to everything where it talks about notes. And that's going to be the style that uses footnotes. If your question is, how do you cite information that you found that was in a footnote? That varies a little bit style to style, but usually the way that people indicate that is actually by just using FN with the page number of the item so that it, if you get your information from a website, then it's probably not going to have a footnote. So you would want to, so we can look at that actually. So let's look at how you would, let me share my screen again. And we can go back to the library's homepage and look at how you would find that. So from the library's homepage, we're going to go to research guides and citation help. And if you're not going to have an automatically generated citation on a website, but our guides do help with how to do that. So I'm not sure which style you're using. Feel free to put in the chat if you'd like. But let's say you were using APA style. You could come to our APA guide and click on website. And this is going to give you the format and then examples of how that format might look in different scenarios. So if you look right here, you would just follow this format, and that would be how you would cite the information. So one thing to know about web pages, often they don't have a clear author. If they don't have an author who's a living person, a lot of times the author is the company that maintains the web page. So we saw that in our Fashion Snoops example. We put down Fashion Snoops was the author because they were the company that created the material or had the material created. So if you're not finding somebody who's a living person as an author, you can list the name of the company that published the website, which is often but not always the name of the website itself, but that can involve a little bit more investigation. If you were instead interested in seeing how to do this, for example, let's say that you were interested in MLA instead, you can click on MLA, and again in this left menu, it's going to have the style, basic format spelled out, and then it's going to give you some examples of that. So that's how you would figure out how to do just basic website citations. Does anybody have any other questions, or do you have any follow-ups on that if I didn't answer it to your satisfaction? All right, well, please do join us at 5 p.m. on Thursday, December 3rd for the drop-in session where you can get us to answer any questions that you might have. We'll be there until 8 p.m. and you can stop by anytime to get help with anything you might have, ask us any questions. And even, if you've got a bunch of different questions, we're happy to sit there and go through them. If that time doesn't work for you, you can also feel free to stop by virtual office hours or make a one-on-one research appointment. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. Oh, okay, so I see there's another question. Are footnotes used for exact quotations? Or should they be used for paraphrasing? So really, whether or not footnotes are used is irrespective of whether or not you're paraphrasing or doing an exact quotation. You would always need to cite whether you are paraphrasing something or doing an exact quotation. And the question of whether that citation would be in a footnote or not is really down to which style you're using. So if your professor told you to use APA style or MLA style, you would provide a citation regardless of whether it was an exact quotation or a paraphrase, but it wouldn't be in footnote format. It would instead be in the parenthetical format. So it really does depend on the style. The only one of the three that we cover that focuses on footnotes is the Chicago style. The only caveat with that is that sometimes faculty members will ask you to do something that's not necessarily exactly the rules of the style, and you should always look at your assignment to make sure that you are following the exact instructions as they have provided them. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. And again, don't forget to join us on December 3rd. If you have more specific questions you would like us to answer, we are always happy to answer your questions. And between now and then, feel free to just click the Ask Us button on any of our websites to get citation help or help with anything else that you might need at all. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it, and we were glad you were able to stop by.